had the privilege to meet with Dr. Greg Garman, professor at Virginia Commonwealth University and director of the VCU Rice River Center, to discuss the James River and the VCU Rice River Center.
By training, I'm a fisheries biologist, aquatic ecologist. I'm director of VCU's Rice River Center, and I support the research mission out there, and I also manage all of the resources out there to just make everything work to be an awesome field station for VCU.
So let's start with the VCU Rice River Center. And no better way to learn about this organization than through the director himself, Dr. Garman. So I asked him, what is the VCU Rice River Center?
As a research-oriented field station, that's not all we do. We support courses and training and community outreach there, but our primary focus is research. And we have areas of concentration in conservation biology, primarily of fish and avian populations. We have area focus in water quality, looking at pollutants and nutrient algal dynamics and harmful algal blooms. We have an area where we focus on wetland restoration and wetland construction, and how can you restore a functional wetland, these wetlands are so important in terms of the ecosystem services that they provide to coastal landscapes. We do a lot with environmental technology. How can you effectively use drones to collect environmental science data over broad spatial scales? We use high-resolution sonar to count fish in the water column. So you don't have to have nets and take them out. It's remote sensing for fisheries. So we do a lot with technology. And then the last area is climate science. And so we have folks who specifically look at carbon dynamics in the atmosphere and look at sea level rise and salinity intrusion. And again, in the coastal landscapes that the Rice River Center represents, we're starting to see evidence of sea level rise, salinity intrusion, and so we're trying to understand how natural systems down there will respond to these climate-based changes.
According to the Rice River Center's website, the primary mission has been to use this amazing location to enhance society's ability to manage large river systems more effectively. As Dr. Garman continues, saying in a nutshell, the research gives agencies a basis for management and policy decisions. You can't manage what you don't understand. So, why is it important to manage the James River?
It plays many important roles and contributes to society in a lot of ways. Obviously, recreation, and if you're going to recreate in it, it has to be clean enough that you don't mind being in contact with it. It's a municipal water supply, so Richmond gets most of its, not all, but most of its domestic water from the river. It's an important nursery for fishes and an important habitat for migratory birds. To some folks, it's an aesthetic resource. Or it has cultural significance, certainly to indigenous peoples, some of the Native American tribes. The James and these other rivers are just really important culturally. So, it's the challenge is to be able to manage the James or other rivers, not for just one element or one benefit, but to try to manage for multiple uses, multiple stakeholders. There's just such a diversity of reasons to care about the James and to take really good care of it.
With many variables affecting the James River on a daily basis, I asked Dr. Garman, how has the James River changed over time?
I'll answer your question by again focusing on the James River, because for most of my time here at VCU, that's been where I've done most of my research. And when we first came to Richmond, there was no awareness of the river, other than it was a place to uh, dump our wastewater. It was a place to basically get rid of stuff that we didn't want to keep in the city. And there wasn't a lot of recreational use of the river. The river just wasn't celebrated in any way, really. And the biggest thing that I've noticed is that over those 30 years or so, Richmond has become a river city. It celebrates the James River. There are all kinds of recreational opportunities, right in downtown Richmond that you can have. It's featured, when the city tries to promote itself in the city's marketing. You find people, in the river, or next to the river, or near the river all the time. So to me, it's just that level of awareness that has changed 180 degrees over the past 30 years. It's exciting now to live in a place that celebrates the James River and all the things that it does, not just for Richmond, but basically from Richmond, up and through the Blue Ridge all the way down to Hampton Roads. It's an amazing ecological system, and it's encouraging to see that we're taking much better care of it than we did 30 years ago.
I also wanted to know about the impact that fishing plays in the James River, and Dr. Garman's answer was simple. The best approach is catch and release. But beyond just catch and release fishing, he wanted to remind others of how important awareness is to the James River and its future.
So, in terms of, folks who fish in the James, obviously, one thing you can do is practice catch and release fishing. So you can have all the fun of hooking and landing the fish, and then very carefully and very quickly take the hook out, return it back to the water, and then it's there for you to catch another day. So, there are ways to use those living resources sustainably, and that's always a good thing to do. But I'll go back to the awareness thing. I think the folks that use the river, appreciate the river, benefit from it, they really need to be an advocate for the river. So they vote. They might seek public office themselves. They talk to their neighbors. If you appreciate the river, the best thing you can do is talk it up. Make sure the politicians understand that you care about it. Make sure your neighbor understands that if he or she is putting, too much fertilizer on the lawn, that stuff gets into the river and then it goes downstream, and too many excess nutrients cause harmful algal blooms. And that affects the living resources, and it can even make people sick. So again, I think it's that awareness that the whole watershed connects to the James River. So wherever you live in that watershed, what you do to your land, what you do to your property, has an effect, and to just be aware of that. So I'd encourage people that care about the river to just be an advocate for it. James can't speak for itself, obviously, but we can do that for it. So I think that's the best thing that people can do.
If spreading awareness and being advocates for the James River are some of the best things we can do to maintain it, on the opposite end, what are the worst things? What are some of the obstacles facing the James River today?
Certainly one of the things that we're looking at into the future is if you look at the James River in Richmond and then you follow it downstream, for example, it kind of moves from a highly urbanized riparian zone on either side of the river to an agricultural zone, and then it gets down to Hampton Roads, and now it's urbanized again. And so I think one of the concerns that folks have is that urban corridor. If it continues to encroach down from Richmond and up from Hampton Roads, um, the more urbanized, the more development, the more of a built environment you find in that riparian corridor, the harder it will be for the James River to provide the natural structure and function, to maintain good water quality. Um, so I think that the biggest threat is what's happening in that riparian corridor immediately adjacent to the river. And so one of the things we can do is try to, through zoning rules or other regulations, try to keep that riparian corridor as natural and free of development as we can.
Dr. Garman mentions the riparian corridor, which is the transitional area between aquatic and upland ecosystems, a unique plant community consisting of the vegetation growing near a river, lake, stream, or other natural body of water. A healthy riparian corridor maintains bank stability and supports diverse vegetation, which in turn reduces disease and pests, retains nutrients, and helps the water stay clean.